Well, here I am at the edge of Little Rock, Arkansas, coming up on the exit that will take me towards Texarkana, Texas, and then over to Bottom. Excuse me, got the CB going here. I want to make sure there isn't any cussing while I'm on here. So somebody was asking about what is the RPG Museum, and that's an excellent question. Of course, if you go to RPG Tour, TOUR.com, get a little bit of an explanation, but we don't have a whole lot out there. So this has been an idea I've had brewing around for a few decades. I have a fairly large collection myself of role-playing game content. I started gaming in '77, and I have some of my materials from then. I've only had a little bit of trouble with attrition in the '80s, where some people were starting to steal my stuff, unfortunately. But for the most part, I've been able to hold on to my gaming materials throughout the decades. Even during periods of homelessness and such in the late '80s when I was a teenager, I had stuff kept in storage and luckily didn't lose it. And last year, Paul Cardwell, the founder of the Committee for the Advancement of Role-Playing Game Advocacy, CAR-PGA.org, has been taken over by Michael Tresca and others since he retired, wanted to have... Paul had been collecting media's representation of role-playing games and gamers since the earliest years in the early 80s as the anti-gaming movement started. And he had a lot of correspondence with a lot of key people related to the role-playing game world, etc. And he's kept these archives, these file cabinets and shelves and boxes full of materials. They include, all the article snippings from magazines and newspapers, audio messages and cassettes and such, VHS tapes, and much more, as well as written and such communications by postal mail over the decades. And so he was getting up in years, he was in his 80s, and wanted to find some way to try to preserve this content. So we were talking in the fall of 2019 about my coming down, picking up all he had, and then bringing it up to Spokane, and then having our volunteers scan and record and digitize all of it, and since it's starting to show its age. And then we'd put together some sort, we'd add that to the RPG Research Archives, and make it as some sort of resource for the public, which is what RPG Research has always been about. Just this would be just another facet of it. Unfortunately, Paul passed away in March, and fortunately his widow, Gladys, I think they were married, sounds like maybe 60 years or so, she reached out to me when she saw the dialogue I was having and said that she was still okay with my coming down. We'd held off because winter time was coming, and up in Washington the passes in Idaho and Montana and such become problematic to get over in the winter. So I'd said let's wait till the spring thaw, then I can come down. So she and I dialogued a few times, and she agreed that we could go ahead and pick up the materials. I spoke to her yesterday, and it sounds like, I want to confirm this, but from what I understand, she says we can go ahead and keep these materials, because I was hoping we could use it as the foundation of a role-playing game historical museum. And there'll be two phases to it. One initially, which is easiest to do right now for the least money, but a lot of labor, is the virtual museum. So we would have a section of the RPG Research website dedicated as the RPGmuseum.org, where within legal constraints, because there's copyright and all these other things, so we'll have to figure all that out, but basically a curated museum experience of the entire history of role-playing gaming based on different topics. So for example, you want to do a walkthrough virtual experience of what led up to the creation of role-playing gaming and the people involved and all the different things going on. And then let's say maybe you want to go off on a different rabbit hole and do a virtual tour of the anti-gaming movement and how that grew and all the different personalities involved with having that happen. Or you want to focus on what, where it led to the research being triggered. There's a lot of different ways to look at it, and so you can choose different paths, and this just becomes another part of that resource, but do it in a museum style so that it's a little bit more experiential, which, one of the key powers of role-playing gaming is that it is experiential learning, which is a very powerful form of learning. That narrative and such helps it stick for people. And I wanted to be able to try to integrate the power of role-playing gaming into museums, so it would be somewhere along those lines. And initially pretty basic static stuff, but I hope over time we can integrate the power of the role-playing game process into the learning process and just the museum of the history of role-playing gaming. And with Paul's contribution, thanks to Gladys, well, I think this can become a reality. It's going to be more than 20 crates of content that we're going to have as a founding of this museum. The only cost is my getting out here, picking it up, and then bringing it back. And then we got to figure out how we're going to manage it and store it and make it accessible and all that. But we'll get that figured out. But the other part is, I hope over time, with enough donations, we desperately need to move the facilities into a warehouse. Anyway, all of RPG Research. We have a small office, virtual office in downtown Spokane. Right now we can't use most of it because of the COVID restrictions. Most of our training and broadcasting and online sessions are happening in the basement of my house. The servers are running in a basement closet with a whole rack of servers in my house. I have my two trailers, RPG trailers, and the bus in my driveway and on my yard. My neighbors hate me because of the volunteers coming and going and the trailers there, parked there. But it's the only way to keep my costs down and have us have the most benefit to the community, right? We're able to do these things at the lowest cost possible because it's at my house. I'm not paying a ton. It'd easily be $300 a month just for storage fees for the two trailers and the bus, just to store those, without even having space to use them as facilities. The office space, is many hundreds, they're flying by, many hundreds of dollars per month just for the office space. The virtual helps keep that down to just a few hundred. What we really need is some philanthropist somewhere, or else enough in regular monthly donations, and we're not there yet, that we can have at least a 2,000 to 4,000 square foot warehouse. Larger would be better, but that would be the range that we can do everything with, where we can store the bus and the trailers, move the office and training and broadcasting and server hosting activities, all that, to the warehouse, and set up a dedicated portion as a walk-through museum where you can walk in, and initially it would just be your standard museum experience. Here's this, here's that. But I would hope over time, with enough donations and effort from the volunteers, that we could turn it into something more interesting, where it's really an interactive role-playing game museum where you are taking on the role of something like a sleuth or whatever, and you pick which pathway you want to unravel the clues to and go through this experiential learning experience of the museum. But that would take a lot of money, so we'll work with what we got, but that's kind of the idea. But the whole point is that, and we'll probably follow as a guideline Shannon Appelklein's books. They're decade by decade on the history of role-playing games. His is more from a commercial perspective, but there's a lot of overlap, and I think that would be a good guideline for how we would format the website and any potential physical facilities over the coming years. We definitely need donations to make this happen. I've never worked in a museum. I do have an aunt who runs the Park City Museum. There's a statue of my grandfather on Main Street in Park City, by the way, James Hivers III. So I will be reaching out to her for her advice and guidance, because apparently Fairmount family was involved with putting together that museum. And let's see. But yeah, this will be another facet of the 501c3 nonprofit RPG Research, where we've always wanted everything to be as publicly accessible as legally possible. Now the correspondence material and some of the copyright material, we have to figure out what the rules and restrictions are on that. Obviously with the correspondence we want to be careful about people's privacy, and so what is the museum process? For example, like the Museum for J.R. Tolkien and the letters and such, the correspondence between him and many others, there's a process for handling that. I don't know what that process is, but I hope we can get that established through the RPG Museum, through the help of others. So maybe I hope that gives you some idea of what we're thinking with the RPG Museum. Again, it's been kind of percolating in my head for decades. Now it's becoming a reality, as I'll have a whole U-Haul of stuff from Paul's contribution. We set up a GoFundMe at gofundme.com/RPG Museum, where you can donate explicitly for the museum. So we get other donations for RPG research in general to do a lot of things, and that's what's helping, pay for some of this to even happen right now. But if you'd like it to be specifically earmarked for the museum, you just do it through that GoFundMe, and we know that those funds will only be used for the museum. If you have items you want to contribute to the museum, now we don't know which items are, I don't know the whole collection yet. We're going to have to fully itemize what we have, and we'll put that on the website. Once we have that fully itemized list, we're going to want to go through, like Shannon Appelklein's, all of that. I would like us to have in our museum physical copies of everything listed in all of those books. So every book he mentions, every event, just anything to create a physical, tangible reality. It's one thing to read, in a textbook, the history of something. It's another thing to get to experience it. Potentially, let's go really big here. I don't know it'll ever happen, but let's just say, millions of dollars are contributed. I would love for us to have a bunch of LARP rooms where you come in and, there's some trained actor LARPers. They have rough script, but you get to role play through the discovery process of, the different stages and development of different role-playing games in some sort of way, so that you actually come in and interact and get to experience, some actor pretending to be Gary Gygax or Dave Arneson or many others. That may never happen, who knows? But I'd like to at least lay the foundation for that possibility. And so that's what the RPG Museum is we want this history, this tangible history, to be available not just to the scholars. We already have that through RPG research, a scholarly approach. We have our researchers, our PhD volunteers, etc. And that's great, and we want to keep that growing. And this, of course, will be an incredible contribution to the RPG research archives. We will have content available nowhere else in the world, but we also want to make sure that there's a side that's more accessible to the general public. And of course, this includes all forms of role-playing game formats, as we've always done: tabletop, live action, electronic, and hybrids. And this will be no different. We want to expand it in that way. So that's kind of what it is. We don't have any catchy phrases or logos or elevator pitches or any of that at this stage. Hopefully over time we'll be able to clarify that, but I hope that at least explains to you what I have. I'm 100% open to ideas and suggestions. Of course, the key thing will be people to help do it. We have our RPG research volunteers that will be helping when they can. They've got a lot on their plate with Gen Con and World Con coming up, but after that, hopefully a little more time. And then donations. The monetary donations are now where we need the most and we have the least. We've got a lot of volunteers, we've got a lot of community programs and research projects, but we're still averaging only about $3,000 a year in donations from our community through Patreon and PayPal and Facebook, etc. Fortunately, Zombie Orphans Entertainment gave us a whopping $5,000 contribution earlier this year, partly because of us helping with the Fantasy Network development, and that is just wonderful, and that's helped make some of these things possible. But that's not regular money that we can count on to cover the bills each month, etc., and to grow things. So right now we can only count on about $3,000 a month. We can get those numbers up to where we can afford a warehouse. A warehouse is going to be a minimum, like for a small one, $800 to $1,200 a month, and then something a little bit more where we can actually use it and have everything in it. It's going to be closer to the $1,500 to $2,000 a month range, and that's in the 2,000 to 4,000 square foot a warehouse space. If we had around a 4,000 square foot warehouse, oh my goodness, the things we could be doing related to this, boy, it would take us to a whole other level. So we hope someday we can, either through a philanthropist donate the space, excuse me, the way they have for Spark Central, where they're given a whole space rent-free because of the community programs they do. So if some philanthropist wanted to donate a warehouse space that we could do that, that would be wonderful. That would probably be the easiest route. Or if we just finally get to some point where we have enough in donations that we can cover at least a year's worth of rent, a year at a time, then that would be when we can pull the trigger on moving everything to the warehouse and setting up that way. And then we can finally then have the physical museum a reality. Until then, it'll have to be a virtual museum, and I have several scanners, and we'll have volunteers scanning in and recording content like crazy. And I want to talk to Shannon Appelkline about what he thinks about this, and permission to use his books maybe as part of the scaffolding of the experience and such, and we'll go from there. I'm a little hesitant to do anything like a Kickstarter because it's pass or fail on that, and too many great projects haven't, like for example the movie documentary last year on role-playing games in prisons. If you don't handle it exactly right with that, then it doesn't happen. The nice thing about GoFundMe is people donate, and then money comes in, and there's no fixed thing. People can keep donating, and then as money comes in, we can do more. People donated for the RPG trailer. That helped us make some improvements to the RPG trailer. We didn't get enough money to buy a trailer. I ended up having to use my own money, but we were able to, thanks to the donors and their permission, to get a nice generator for the trailer, because the trailer didn't have one, for example. And so going that GoFundMe route gave a lot more flexibility in being able to keep things going. So I'm thinking for the museum, it'll be the same thing. If you want to see the museum go beyond just an online experience into this immersive experience or VR experience or an in-person experience and have the warehouse space, well, then people can donate through that. So that's gofundme.com/RPG Museum. The website will be at rpgmuseum.org. Right now, it's the RPG Research website, but we're working on getting that ready. Once I get back by this weekend with all the materials, I'll start assigning volunteers to start going through and creating an inventory checklist of everything that's there. That will probably take months to do, but we will post on the website each day that we work on it, so that you slowly see a growing list of what we have, and it's going to be extensive. Now, if you have physical content you want to donate, I can give you an address. You'll want to email info at rpgresearch.com, or you can just go to our website, rpgresearch.com, and at the bottom is our business address where you can send donations if there's small amounts. If you got like a module, magazine, article, whatever you think would be good to add to the museum, feel free to send it to the office address. If it's a lot of stuff, like you're talking boxes of stuff, if you're willing to pay the shipping and maybe some insurance on it, or something to make sure it's extra protected, then at that point we're probably going to want it to go to my house initially so that I can go over it, and then we'll move it to a safer facility. But or if it's really huge, where it's like a trailer load of stuff and you don't have the money to ship it, and it's in the continental U.S., depending upon what it is, I'm willing to come out and get it, just like I'm doing right now for the Cardwells. So if you feel you've got something that would be great to add to the museum, big collection like that, you let me know. We'll figure it out. I would love for this to be the world's best historical museum of role-playing games in a very tangible, experiential way, which reflects the role-playing game experience and its benefits. So there you go. Long-winded, but there's a lot to cover there. And so here we are. I've passed through Little Rock, and we're heading towards Texarkana. I've still got about 257 miles to go till Bonham, Texas. There are no hotels there that I can afford right now, so I'm going to see if there's along the way a motel I can stay at close to Bonham, so that I can be there tomorrow morning to go pick everything up. So there you go. Wherever you may be well, happy gaming, and do please consider donating at rpgresearch.com/donate, or specifically for the museum, gofundme.com/RPG Museum.